You've made it to the 5th in an exhaustive series of 6 Year 11 GCSE English Language videos. We've been reading the first chapter of Penelope Lively's Heatwave and have been introduced to Pauline, daughter Teresa, son-in-law Maurice and grandson Luke. They have homes in adjoining houses entitled Y11 within idyllic countryside, but the inside of the houses aren't what you would expect from the exterior. We've learnt that Maurice has a certain way about him and likes to appear knowledgeable, but self-deprecating with it. We've learnt that Teresa is madly, blindly in love with this Maurice, just as Pauline was with her previous husband, Harry. If you've completed the first 4 videos, you've done some magnificent work so far, I hope. There's been a description of an event triggering a poignant past memory, some focused work on vocabulary, and some analysis of some unusual similes, likening idyllic country houses to space capsules or hidden nuclear bunkers. Anyway, enough of this. Let's carry on honing skills for GCSE English Language. You're watching Schofield on Shakespeare. Lively continues her first chapter of Heatwave by giving us more information about Pauline's ostensibly charming and quirky son-in-law, Maurice. He is on the way up, career-wise, and is making waves. Pauline's purchase of the cottages had been made possible by her inheritance of her parents' house when her mother died 2 years after her father. She was still working as a full-time editor at a London publishing firm. Teresa was at art college. Maurice was unknown to either of them and therefore off-stage to all intents and purposes. In fact, Maurice was busy establishing an early reputation as the maverick young author of books on quirky aspects of history that flattered the reader by being simultaneously scholarly and inviting. A sparky account of the tobacco industry, a contentious book on the marketing of the stately home business. Right now, Maurice is working on a history of tourism, a hefty project which will discuss the ways in which the natural and the man-made environments have been exploited in the interests of commerce. He is in frequent communication with an influential film producer. There is a serious talk of a TV series as a tie-in with the book. These discussions have had an inevitable effect on the enthusiasm of Maurice's publisher for the work in hand. Maurice has stepped from the position of an interesting author of eccentric books to a potentially valuable asset. It is because of this book that Maurice and Teresa are at World's End this spring. Before their marriage, Pauline used to let out the larger of the 2 cottages while keeping the smaller one for her own use. When Teresa married Maurice, Pauline gave her the larger cottage as a weekend retreat. This year, Maurice has announced that they will spend the whole summer down here so that he can apply himself undisturbed to the book, of which the first draft is complete. He will, of course, have to make occasional forays to London to check references, and his editor, James Saltash, will be coming down to World's End sometimes at weekends to go through the manuscript with Maurice. World's End will become an editorial powerhouse this summer. Pauline gave up her job 5 years ago. She now works from home as a freelance copy editor, in demand because she is widely known and highly competent. She takes on as much or as little work as she wishes and spends her time rescuing authors from semantic outrages and the carelessness of creative zest. She plods through novels, checking that the heroine's eyes have not turned from blue to grey halfway along, that spring has not suddenly given way to winter, that Sunday does not follow Monday. She queries awkward sentence constructions and tactfully indicates that the colon and the semicolon are not interchangeable. The manuscripts on which she works are peppered with her succinct and neutral comments, questioning the sense of a tortuous passage, drawing attention to a cliché. The author will, of course, go his or her own sweet way in any case. Many will accept some or all of Pauline's amendments with a varying degree of resistance. The intransigent few will fight to the last comma for the principle of authorial infallibility. Pauline rather enjoys these exchanges, the trading of dictionary references and literary precedents, and of course, so far as she is concerned, if they so wish, they can go down with all solecism blazing. It's no skin off her nose. She has done her stuff and enjoyed the doing of it, working away through long quiet days at her desk in front of the window, lifting her eyes now and then to note the changing light on the field as the sun swings up and over, getting up from her chair to take down a reference book or make a cup of coffee. Pauline is a copy editor and as such needs to have an expert handle on the rules of grammar. When giving feedback to her authors, she underlines awkward sentence constructions and tactfully indicates that the colon and the semicolon are not interchangeable. In my experience, many pupils in Year 11 struggle with using semicolons accurately, let alone know exactly what the difference is between semicolons and colons. How about you? Be honest. Do you know what the exact difference is between colons and semicolons? Why not press pause to write down some notes about this, or possibly use the internet to research? This video will resume in 5 seconds' time. If you know that you're pretty hazy on both semicolon and colon use, why not watch my 2 videos on these topics in full within YouTube, which gives you plenty of examples and practice. However, the way I like to see it is that semicolons should be used to create a relatively equitable link between consecutive clauses, whereas a colon should be used explicitly when the second clause builds upon the first. Here are some examples taken from my favourite book of all time, Edith Wharton's House of Mirth. One or two persons in brushing past them lingered to look, semicolon. For Miss Bart was a figure to arrest even the suburban traveller rushing to his last train. Remember, both sides of the semicolon need to make sense on their own, i.e. they need to have a subject and a main verb. And if using a semicolon, there needs to be a feeling of symmetry, equality between both sides. Now for the colon. He declared himself entirely at her disposal, colon. The adventure struck him as diverting. In this sentence, Wharton has used a colon because the second part builds on the first. Using a semicolon would be too passive and inward-looking. The colon gives a sense of momentum moving forward. Task 2, and it's time for some more work on vocabulary. As completed in previous videos, you need to set up a table like the one shown on screen. Press pause to copy this out now, making sure that you leave sufficient space in your table to fit in full definitions and full clauses from the text which contain the word. Now look again at how the words are used within the context and include the full clauses within the example column of your table. You will have a pretty good idea of what the words mean, but check how precise your understanding is by using a dictionary and copying out the definition. Press pause to complete your table. First up, a maverick, an individual, someone who doesn't fit the mould, a character. Next, the adjective contentious. Contentious subjects are likely to cause debate and disagreement. Another example sentence would be, talks are expected to cover contentious issues such as power sharing and a ceasefire. Next, intransigence, a more specific version of stubborn. Writers can be touchy, intransigent creatures, hence the suggestion that they will fight to the last comma. Sadly, as COVID has shown, none of us are infallible. Infallibility is the noun for this adjective. Another example of this within a sentence would be, the system of contact tracing is sadly not completely infallible, especially in the UK. Last up, solecism, behaviour that is a social mistake or not polite. One of the many things that I love about Lively is that she recognises the complexity of human emotions. It is rare that we purely love or hate anyone. Thus, Pauline is both interested in her son-in-law Maurice and finds him faintly irritating. Or, in a different context, Maurice manages to achieve an astonishingly difficult balancing act by producing books which are relatively accessible, yet seem to be intellectual, thus giving the opportunity for readers to smugly pat themselves on their backs as they turn each page. Time for you now to write a wonderful paragraph, dear pupils, viewers and subscribers. A paragraph in which you describe a person towards which you have mixed feelings. Respect and dislike, for instance, or admiration and unease, or any other two conflicting emotions. Grab your pen, get writing, and press pause. I wrote, his very tone flatters in its apparent confidentiality. I shouldn't be telling this to you, or speaking so openly, but of course I know I can trust you, it seems to suggest. Intense hazel eyes bore down and aim to penetrate. And of course, he is a remarkably good-looking man. Everyone says so. Classically chiselled jawline, all-American physique, and an iron handshake which screams of trustworthiness and decency. Yet, and yet, each time you hear those familiar coaxing tones, it is impossible to avoid an instinctive shudder, as if somehow beneath the cordial exterior lies a snake-like being to be avoided at all costs. How do I attempt to make this paragraph interesting? Well, there are the subtle hints from the word go that there is something about this man which is slimy, which means he should not be trusted. The adjective apparent undermines the noun confidentiality and suggests that perhaps this man is not being as open or transparent as he would like you to believe. Further uncertainty stems from it seems to suggest rather than the simpler it suggests. Whilst the post-dash phrase everyone says so implies that the narrator may not share the opinions of the majority when it comes to praising this man's looks and by extension character. Note also the short sentence for effect, yet and yet, followed by an ellipsis which ushers in the narrator talking more explicitly about how he finds this apparently marvellous hunk repellent. Notice the precise and subtle vocabulary which expresses complex ideas with clarity, to paraphrase the top band of the GCSE English Language OCR mark scheme for paper 2 questions 5 and 6. And these words don't necessarily need to be particularly long or polysyllabic. Take bore, for instance, not used in the sense of making someone lose interest, but more in terms of penetrating, piercing, as you would when making a hole in something using a tool. Or coaxing, being flatteringly, gently persuasive. There's also the adjective cordial, in which the person is being no more polite than strictly necessary, which might make the other person wonder about the sincerity of their feelings and behaviour. I'm afraid that's it for lesson 5. Just one more to go. Today we've done some work on boosting vocabulary. You can never do enough of this. Considering how to use colons and semicolons accurately, and capturing more complex emotions within your own writing. We've also been continuing reading Penelope Lively's Heatwave. Have you ordered your copy yet? Many thanks for watching Schofield on Shakespeare.